Okay, so welcome everyone. So this talk is about supporting Jenkins with the Support Core plugin. So just to kind of introduce myself real quick, my name is Christou. I'm a developer support engineer at CloudBees. I work with Oleg as well. So previously I used to work on the Eclipse Hudson at Oracle, and I moved over to Jenkins, so I'm a core contributor for Jenkins. One of the things I'm kind of known for in the community is doing the subversion, updating it to version 1.8. And currently I'm the maintainer of a code coverage tool called Covertura. So that's about me. So the one thing is that, a lot of you guys have probably encountered some type of issue and error, kind of performance issue with Jenkins, right? At least one point while using it. And the one thing that most users like myself will do is immediately restart the instance, right? Like I just stop it and I start it back up, and I'm like, that'd be good enough for me. And all of a sudden it's like, yes, it's fixed now. There's nothing to worry about. It's all done. Whew, right? Like we passed that hurdle. And unfortunately, that's unfortunately not the case, because the thing is that you kind of want to like figure out like what happened, right? Like why did it crash, or why did it error, or why was it very slow? And the thing is that I'm not sure if you guys have gotten this, but I remember getting a lot of times like calls like 2 o'clock in the morning where they would say something like, oh, one of the servers is down or something like that, and you have to wake up and kind of like rustle, get the clothes ready, and then like try to figure out like what's kind of happening with this server, right? I've had plenty of those calls, and I was kind of thinking to myself, initially what I would tell everyone is, the first thing is not to panic, right? Let's not, let's take this kind of slow. Let's make sure that we gather information and understand kind of what happened, then let's fix it. That way we make sure that we never encounter this again. The one problem though is that, if you're doing this like in like a heavy load time, or you're doing this in the middle of the night, it's not exactly convenient, right? So we have to develop like a kind of a method for kind of like figuring this stuff out for us, while we're idle or we're away. And in comes the Support Core plugin. So one of the advantages for this plugin is about every time you click on a page within Jenkins, installing this plugin, it kind of in the back end keeps track of every single page that you click on, and it records the time. And the great thing about this is if it takes over about 15 seconds, I believe, the thing is that it starts gathering information. It tries to figure out, why did a request take more than like 15 seconds? And this is great for developers, like me, that develop plugins to kind of understand, where performance issues could potentially be. And I've used this very, very heavily in real world as well to kind of understand, where Jenkins could be slow. So a lot of times you might see things like LDAP or like authentication and things like that. So you want to understand kind of where this stuff is happening. So I'm going to do a very quick demo here. So I guess I should kind of like talk about the scenario that kind of happened. So so imagine this scenario, right? You are working, you're managing this Jenkins server, and all of a sudden, you have a boss that clicks on a link, and that link takes, maybe 5-10 minutes to complete, or never even completes. However, all the other users are perfectly fine. They're up and running, and your boss says, you have to figure out what's wrong with this. Every time I click this link, something bad happens, right? So, you're kind of like scrambling around trying to figure out exactly what has happened to this environment, since in like this certain amount of time period. So let me open up this support plugin. So okay, I have to expand it a little bit. So this also gathers, okay, let me shrink it a little bit so everyone can see everything. So when you install this plugin, it creates at the root Jenkins page a support link, and directly there it talks about kind of like everything about this instance. So it tells us, it tells what the Jenkins version is, what plugins are running, some errors, some log files, and like slow requests, which I'll explain in a minute. But the point is to kind of, let's say for an example, if you are not the one managing a Jenkins instance, but it's like, a different team, installing something like this, you can kind of get to a root cause, without even knowing much about that environment. All you know is, something bad happened, so you want to investigate. So in this case, let's generate the bundle. So remember, our boss said that something was very slow, and it's our job to kind of figure out what kind of happened. So when you click Generate Bundle, it actually creates the zip file that disappeared. Okay, so okay, I apparently can't. Let me actually open it up. So I don't think anyone can actually read that, even me. Let me see if I can make it just a little bit as icons, maybe. Zoom. I guess the Zoom in Mac is not working. There's like literally a Zoom in there, and it's not working. Let's see. Okay, so anyways, there's a folder called slow requests. So if you extract this zip file, there's a bunch of, okay, let me actually move this. There's a lot of files in here, and one of the folders is called slow requests, and this kind of gathers all the information of what kind of happened. So you can see right here we have one HTTP request that took a long time, supposedly. It took over 15 seconds. So the thing is that if we open this up, so this kind of tells us more information about it. So like oh, okay, I guess, let me press it, enter a couple times. Okay, so it tells us the username, who is apparently the boss, so we know that this is him. And the thing is that, he was at this URL, so we kind of know what happened. And in this specific example, I did a very simple thing, which is I did a thread.sleep. So it's basically just slept for like 5 minutes or something. So the thing is that it's just important to understand that the request I made took a very long time, and one of the things is that every 5 seconds it will generate a new thread dump, and the great thing is that it tells you information about it. So a lot of times, me as a support person, I will tend to see usually like it could be potentially related to a plugin. A lot of times I will see something here like related to LDAP. If a lot of users, they claim like, my Jenkins is very slow every time I click the login button. And, if LDAP is very slow, obviously logging in is going to be slow as well. So it's something kind of for the LDAP team to investigate, at the time and kind of understand as well. So you can kind of see like here, as like this first line right here, it says thread.sleep. So I know that my boss, kind of purposely did this. So, kind of case solved, right? So we figured out the root cause of why his thing was slow. So we just let him know about this and, tell him to not do thread.sleep anymore. Okay, so one of the things is that, as part of the Summer of Code project, one of the things that we wanted to kind of do was, make this UI a little bit nicer to kind of like manage these bundles as well. Unfortunately, we didn't get the time to kind of do that, but it was like we wanted to kind of like be able to add or to create new bundles or delete them within here and just make the administration a lot easier and do some cool things with anonymization for the content that's generated here. And the last thing I wanted to kind of talk about real quick is me as a support person, I kind of want to know, like one of the big things that like I want to learn is, like when I encounter something like an error message, not when it's very slow, but when it's like an error message, I want to know like what version of Jenkins they were running and what plugins they were running. Because if there's incompatibilities between a couple plugins or with the core version, I kind of want to know that. So one thing is that whenever a support bundle is generated, I assume everyone in here is like familiar with Docker. So a Docker file is actually created, which, okay. So a Docker file is created. I can't exactly, there we go. So this Docker file basically has the from, so like the version of Jenkins along with all of the plugins, the exact same version of the plugins. It's not, it's like a kind of like an infrastructure Docker container where it just contains the Jenkins version and all of the plugins similar versions as well. Just so you have like a test bed to kind of like test this in like a different environment to reproduce. I was gonna say that just real quick. So if you guys have any questions, yeah. So questions now. So right, so you can see right here that it's actually giving me the amount of milliseconds that it took. In this case, it's 11. If I start, so it will keep generating this thread dump until it hits about 2 meg. So I'm not sure how far that is, but let's go all the way down here. So we're at 90 seconds right now, and it's still taking a very long time. So the thing is that it will generate after 15 seconds, but then it will keep generating if it's very slow still. So it will continue to like keep writing to the file. So even longer periods of time. So you can figure that stuff out. Okay, one more question, because. So generate means like I generate it right now. The 24-hour one is it's more for like if something happens to my Jenkins and I don't have access to it. This at the very least gets you some of the log information and stuff. So it actually, so one of the things that this does is it generates logs and it saves those in the support core plugin, and it generates this information and it zips it up for you. So if, for example, there was something that happened and you don't have access to the UI, you can always go on disk and grab that file, and then you can see what the errors were. So there are things to kind of turn it off. One of the, so by default, it will always run. There are Java arguments to actually turn it off. One of the things with the summer of code was we wanted to introduce like the ability to configure that from the UI versus command arguments. So yeah, it is configurable. Okay, any other questions real quick or? Okay, all right then, thank you guys.